Welcome to the Mrs. Are Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. My name is Jim, and this episode is going to focus on top 50 players, and we're going to focus on the Carolina Panthers. So we're going to use the NFL DraftFanatics.com mock draft simulator. We're going to implement our own player board for the Panthers. So I would like to give a shout. Well, first of all, let's talk about how to start. So we'll do Panthers. There's a second round challenge button over here. So we're going to click second round challenge and enter the draft. A second round challenge is 10 unique 2-round drafts. Okay. So we will do 10 2-round drafts and we'll talk about which players we think the Panthers should target. So you can already see Cameron Ward is at the top. We're going to talk about some other top 10 players, okay? And let's start with Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback from Colorado. And then in round 2, I am of the opinion that the Panthers need just about everything. I'm going to avoid wide receiver because they took Xavier Legette in round 1 last year. So I would save wide receiver for a later round discussion, but let's talk about other players with top 50 grades. Ariante Ursary, tackle for Minnesota. Okay. Player with a top 50 grade. I want to give a shout out to several people. I want to give a shout out to Broshmo. I want to give a shout out to Kyle Krabs at 33rd team and Locked On Scouting. Shout out to Dean Kindig and a shout out to PFF. I am looking at all 4 of their player boards. And in fairness, like I'm not looking at Broshmo's board. I just follow his podcast and to see if he's rating any player higher than others. So I can give a shout out to just any player that's really moving up boards at this point. Okay. So you can see Shedeur Sanders. I don't remember what his rank was the last time I picked him, but now I'll point out that he's 13th. And I will pick him again. And then in round 2, I'm looking for a good football player. Okay. So among players that I would talk about would be Princely Umanlayan, the edge from Ole Miss, as a top 50 edge. So if you look, Sanders is staying at 13th right now. So I am going to continue to pick Sanders until he's up close to where Cameron Ward is. Okay. So I'm picking Sanders again. And then another defensive lineman that needs to be talked about, Jordan Birch from Oregon. Observe that Birch is currently 63rd. On the player board. Okay. Sanders is still 13th. Picking him again. Okay. The next defensive lineman I want to talk about, Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, 71st on the player board right now. And I'm picking him for the Panthers in round 2. Okay. So at this point, Sanders is off the board. So he went earlier to the Giants. So another quarterback to talk about is Jalen Milroe, who's currently 36th on the Panthers board. So I'm going to pick Milroe. Okay. Offensive lineman to talk about in the top 50. Cam Williams, offensive tackle from Texas. Okay, in round 2. And then we're going to talk about a couple more offensive tackles with the next 2 second-round picks. So we can see Sanders and Milroe He stayed at 33, so I will pick Milroe again. And then I want to talk about 2 offensive tackles. And it helps if I know how to spell. So 1 offensive tackle is Josh Simmons from Ohio State. Observe, he is currently 316 on the Panthers player board. At this point, I have done 6 of 10 2-round drafts. Okay, so a second-round challenge is 10 2-round drafts. I have done 6 of the 10. Okay, Milroe has moved up to 30th. I'm picking Milroe again. And this time, let's talk about the other Josh. Okay. Offensive tackle Josh Connerly from Oregon, top 50 player. Observe, he's 357 when I pick him now. Okay, and then Milroe went from 30 to 29. I'm going to pick him again. And other players. So Tacario Davis, cornerback from Arizona, top 50 player. And you can see I'm definitely going around to a lot of different positions. And ultimately, every team's player board is different on this simulator because the only time the player boards change is when somebody does a mock draft for that team. So I'm going to pick Milroe again. And there's at least one more corner I'm going to talk about in the top 50. Siobhan Ravel from Eastern Carolina. Okay. And then this is my last mock draft within this sequence. I'm going to pick Milroe again. He's 29th. And another corner to talk about would be Denzel Burke from Ohio State. If he is there in round 2, that is another top 50 player. Okay, so that was 10 2-round drafts. I just completed 10 2-round drafts for Carolina. Talked about Shedeur Sanders, quarterback from Colorado. Tackle Ariante Ursary in round 2 from Minnesota. Edge Princely Umanlayan from Ole Miss in round 2. Defensive lineman Jordan Birch from Oregon in round 2. Defensive lineman Walter Nolan from Ole Miss in round 2. Tackle Cam Williams from Texas in round 2. Offensive tackle Josh Simmons from Ohio State in round 2. Offensive tackle Josh Connerly from Oregon in round 2. Cornerback Tacario Davis from Arizona in round 2. Jalen Milroe, quarterback from Alabama in round 1. Cornerback Siobhan Ravel from Eastern Carolina in round 2. And cornerback Denzel Burke from Ohio State in round 2. Okay. And the way, let's do one other thing here with the simulator. So let's do this thing called the first round challenge. And let's do Carolina. And you saw me move 3 quarterbacks up. So a first round challenge is 5 unique first rounds for Carolina. So let's do Cam Ward as one of the 5 best picks for Carolina. Let's do Shedeur Sanders, who's currently 13th on their player board. Okay. Let's do Jalen Milroe. Okay, and if those three quarterbacks aren't available, what would Carolina do in round one? Okay, I like Mason Graham over Luther Burden, so I would pick Graham. And then I would also pick Nick Scorton over Luther Burden if I am Carolina. Okay. So that was Cameron Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Jalen Milroe, Mason Graham, and Nick Scorton as 5 good first-round picks for the Panthers. Okay. So the reason I did that is that in this simulator, if you come to the team needs section and you scroll to find Carolina, over on the far right is a player list. So if you click that player list, you will see, in this case, Cameron Ward is 3rd on the player board. And if we just look at the quarterbacks, Sanders is 13th, Milroe is 29th. So we can see on this player board, Walter Nolan moved up to 52 when I picked him in the 2nd round. Another player I picked was Jordan Birch. He moved up to 51. So you saw these players picked, and like if we look at Cam Williams of Texas, he moved up to 73rd when I picked him. So the reason I point this out is that doing one 2nd round challenge or me picking somebody in the 2nd round ones, right? Because if you look at every 2nd round pick, none of them were duplicated. I could duplicate Milroe or I could duplicate Sanders in round 1, but the 2nd round challenge requires every player to be unique. So I picked everybody in the 2nd round ones. So they move like right to the top 50, but they don't move all the way up to the top of the Panthers board. So you would have to do probably, I would say, if you pick somebody 3 times in round 2 and they're not at the top of the board, I might question why you're picking that player over whoever else is dropping out of round 1. But you should be at somewhere between, like, if you pick somebody 3 to 5 times in round 2, they should be at the top of the round 2 player board. With round 1, it's going to take more work. And what I mean by that is that there's times where it takes 30 mock drafts to get somebody to go to the top of the round 1 player board. And that's by design. We don't want one person coming in and it be in the Wild West and they have complete control of the Panthers player board. So we make it that you have to be the fanatic that we're looking for. The more mock drafts you do, the more likely the player you like will go to round 1 or go to the top of your round 1 player board. So my name is Jim, and this is the Mrs. Are Relevant podcast with NFLDraftFanatics.com. This was the demonstration of a 2nd round challenge to implement your own player board for a team. Okay. And the way that you implement a player board is by doing either a 1st round challenge or a 2nd round challenge and picking the players that you like. And they will move up the draft board. Okay. So we implement a draft board by doing mock drafts. This is a mock draft simulator. We are not trying to implement everybody's spreadsheets, and it will also average out. And what I mean by that is that I picked 10 players for the Panthers in round 2. If you pick 10 players for the Panthers in round 2, there's a good chance we agree on 3 of them and 7 of them are different. So the 3 we agree on are the 3 that move up the most. And then the 7 that we're different on, technically the 2nd player wins. So, or the last player wins. So if 3 people do a 2nd round challenge, the players that we have in common are going to go to the top because those are the players we picked the most. The person that picked 3rd is likely going to have a more recency effect on the player board, but that doesn't drop the other 2 off completely. Just realize that the more you do it, the more control that you have. Okay. So my name's Jim. This is NFLDraftFanatics.com Mock Draft Simulator. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, every day is draft day if you have the right attitude. Thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to interacting with you on the draft every day through April. Thank you so much.